This is Deborah Atkinson, and you're listening to the Voice for Fitness Professionals podcast, where I share programming, marketing, and promotion strategies that are easy, enjoyable, even fun, so you can create a business and a life that you love. And this episode is all about how to interview like a pro so that you can get clients, which is really the reason that you're going to be there. Have you ever wondered how to interview so you can maximize the opportunity? Maybe monetize the opportunity is a better word. If you haven't been asked for an interview, I'll say this: you will and you should. In fact, right now, I'll let you know this is really a two-part podcast episode. If you're not ready, or maybe you have interviewed and felt like you didn't do your best, then this is going to help you do it better next time. And you may or may not need the next episode, but this episode is all about how to get ready so that when you do book or get booked on an interview, you can knock it out of the park in two ways. For your interviewee or your interviewer, the host of the show, the anchor, it might be you, but also for the person who's listening or watching or reading, because your interview may be transcribed, so that they will do what it is you want them to do. So they get the help in the way that you want to help them. So let me define interview before we go too far. Anytime somebody else is asking questions could be an interview opportunity. And that is, a chance to share your expertise, answer questions based on your knowledge or experience. After all, there's a reason you are being asked to do the presentation or the interview, or people showed up, maybe if you're hosting, to ask you questions. So whether you sit on a panel at an event, make an appearance at a local media station or the Today Show, think big, or you host an event and then you have a Q&A afterward, or you're a guest on a podcast, just to name a few, any of those and many more, qualify if you want to know how to interview so you get results and you get asked back. This is your episode. Do you know there are lots of people who appeared on Oprah, the holy grail of interviews and free publicity, free advertising, and yet they weren't ready to monetize the traffic that came afterward, and so nobody has ever heard about them again. When you know how to interview, so you stay on track with your key points, and you make your host look good, so you have fun, both of you, and you get asked back, you'll win the audience over and you'll make the station or the host love you. So how do you prepare for your interview? And, first of all of this is going to be in the show notes, but what I'd really love for you to do is to do some homework afterward. Actually come to the show notes and look at what I've written here and start doing your homework. At the end of each one of these points, I'm going to give you an example of what that's like for you. So first of all, you want to, in order to prepare, identify your teachable points. Ideally, you're on and you have a method. You have a step-by-step process. And whether you've identified that for yourself or not, you do. So I'd love to reach through the microphone and talk directly to you about what it is you're doing. Something sets you apart. You have a system. You have a unique way of doing something. Every time you meet with a client, or you meet with a client who's got a specific issue, maybe it's that their lower back bothers them and you've zoomed in on the fact that they really do have a weak core and they're not going about doing their core right. Maybe their core exercises are the problem. You have okay, here's what I'm going to do. Here's the first step, second step. Here's how I teach this. And maybe it's you teach balance to older adults. You have a method. You have some exercises that you do. And what you want to do is coin some kind of a term. So create an acronym, that is balance, B, A, L. Those are the kinds of steps that somebody's looking for when they interview you, and you won't get sidetracked. And here's how it helps you. You can remember I'm on L. L stands for, what? I don't know. But think about how you create that system. And the shorter that word, ideally, the better, because you may have some short interviews, and we'll talk about that. Know what it is that sets you apart, that system. Your specific system, your specific method. You can use my process. That's what you want to be able to say on the show. Know what your customers hate. So you've got to have done some research. Ideally, if you already have a package or a product or a service that you're offering, you have better, in today's age, have done your research on what it is people may have tried already and hated. Because that's a way to set yourself apart from somebody else. And you want to be able to list those. So you can say, while you're talking, I know that you don't want X, Y, and Z, but you do want A, B, and C. And those specific things, whoever your customer is, they've got things. Probably this isn't their first rodeo by the time they get to you. And that's so very true of me. And so I know my customers hate, and don't take offense to this if you are a 22-year-old trainer, but they hate it when a 22-year-old trainer specifically doesn't get them. So you may be a trainer who's the anomaly. You're the exception to the rule. But unfortunately, you'll get stereotyped until you can really get your message out. So it's a huge opportunity if you're a young trainer for you. But they hate it when a young, hot, lots of core, flashy trainer doesn't get that they're intimidated, that they're afraid of getting injured, that they don't want to do a burpee, that they hate being treated like they're not working hard enough. And what they want is somebody who understands, going through midlife, that they've potentially done years of exercise, but suddenly it's not working, that they don't understand the fatigue that they've got and the reason that they can't get motivated and the confusion that they've got. I mean, all of those things are a piece of what you need to say or know in depth about your specific audience. And you also want to have a pitch. And that means this is my idea for a segment that your listeners will really love. So you want to create that pitch that's news somehow. So if you're doing a balance workshop, you might be thinking, well, balance is always popular, or what we call evergreen. And I get it. You're right, it is. But there's potentially a recent study. There is a quote that you can say that there are, X million baby boomers in the world who are trying to prevent osteoporosis or reduce their risk of falling and want to stay independent, and they're exercising wrong. You can say that and bring that to life, and you might tie it to, there is maybe an active aging month, right? Or an active aging week that happens in the fall. So you can tie it to specific times of year. Maybe it's Grandparents' Day. And you can tie it to, here's how you can exercise with your grandparents. There are lots of different ways that you can make it timely, relevant, right now. Share a brand new study that just came out in 2019. There are lots of things that you can do to create a pitch that is actually news. And maybe it's because you're going to do a workshop. And you can use that to feature your product or service for the reason of, hey, let's publicize this. So here's an example. Recently, I did a segment about an upcoming event, a workshop for older adult fitness. And I pulled 3 key reasons I was doing the workshop. And I had one physical demonstration for each. Now, of course, if you're doing an audio interview, can't necessarily do that. But if you're good at telling stories, you can paint the picture. So say if you're listening with us, what I want you to do is stand up. And I want you to put your weight on your heels, and I want you to feel the difference between that and putting the weight on the balls of your feet. That's one big mistake that people make when they're positioning themselves doing a standing exercise. That's just an example, but that was an easy to follow. You could do a balance exercise with someone on just an audio. So easily that live demonstration, putting a physical or putting a mental concept teachable point into a physical exercise is going to make it stick. And you're going to be much more interesting. So on camera, the news loves us because we can bring demonstrations. We can bring tools and prompts even. I demonstrated how to do an important strength training exercise that could be done at home. The viewers could be doing it with us, and how to make it effective if an adult wanted to use lighter weight and they couldn't go heavy as I was recommending. I cued the movement in detail, pointing out where to feel it, where not to feel it, where to put their weight, where the head position should be. And then I did 2 more parts of the workshop. So sharing little snippets of what was, an hour and a half workshop in a segment was really important. So I covered all those 3 big areas I was going to be discussing at the workshop to really tease them, and pulled one juicy tip from each one to get the point across of why they were included and how important they were. So I didn't gloss over it. I backed it up with research. So I had this study. I showed how many people fall because they do this incorrectly, how much muscle loss there is, what happens if you're not exercising correctly to bone density. Those things were a part of it. And that kind of thinking should go into any presentation. And you can make it fit yours no matter what your topic is. And remember that if you want to get to the end game, you're thinking, I want to sell more of my products, or I want to sell more of my programs or my services. What you're doing and talking about in your interview should be directly related to that. Your program should be the logical next step. How do you plan for different lengths of interviews? Because I'll tell you, as an example, I gave you earlier the adult strength training workshop or fitness workshop. I've delivered that in the 90-minute workshop, on a 30-minute podcast, a 9-minute news segment, and the hardest by far was a 2-minute segment. We went long. It was supposed to be a little shorter than 2 minutes, but wow, that's hard. So be ready. And my suggestion is rehearse for the shortest segments the most, because you have to make every word and every second count. But here's how you'd plan for different interview lengths. Go through all the homework that I mentioned earlier. Know what your customer wants. Know what they hate. Know what sets you and your service apart, and your special methodology. Create an outline that includes your bullet points. And so it's going back to, 7th grade speech, right? When you learned, I got to create the bullet points, my talking points. I'm going to now flesh them out. What's a demonstration for each one of those, or an example, or maybe a story, case study, and an explanation about it. And ask in advance how long your segment is, because, is it a 3-minute live segment where you've got to get it right? Is it a 15-minute summit interview or a 30-minute podcast? Rehearse it and time it. So when you have a workshop or, a book, for instance, there's a reason you created it, and you can use that to help you flesh this out. Those reasons are likely your bullet points. Hopefully you created it based on demand, customer demand, not because you wanted it or wanted to, but because your customers tell you that's why they come to you and that's what they most want or they're confused by. The other things they've tried and hate are a part of your talking about your product or your service. The outcome they want is a part of your product or service in the way that you should be talking about it. If you know how to interview, you also know how to create marketing copy and vice versa. So if you've done this homework already and you're getting great results, you're filling seats in programs really well, then you've already done this. Go back to your marketing copy and read what you've written. But if you're not filling it, then this will help you. These things would be on your flyer and in your emails and broadcasts. so that you can get people in. And as painful as it might be, when you're rehearsing, record it. Whether it's audio or it's video, record it and play it back. Do you have energy? Are you fun? Because the interviewer is going to be lively, strong, and fun. So if I'm the host of my own podcast, I know my listeners are not going to keep coming back with millions of other things that they could be listening to unless it's fun, unless I give them concrete points. Can you match your host's energy? If you've got passion about what you're doing, of course you can. But in front of a microphone or a camera, it feels different. So you really do have to practice. Practice in front of a mirror too, that can be helpful. How do you interview when you're asked a question that you aren't prepared for? And that is bound to come because you may be asked, in fact, you may volunteer, here's 3 to 5 questions, that would be great. So you make it easy for your interviewer. But, in a conversation, which is really what you're having, and the longer the segment is, the more this is likely, there will be a follow-up question. And for instance, when I'm interviewing somebody, I know my audience, I know my listener, and I know that if they hear a certain term, that might be confusing. So I'm going to stop and say, for the listener, can we define that? So that question may not have been when you counted on. Now, that's an easy, benign question, but I might ask something else. I might ask something about what really made you decide to do this? What prompted this? Maybe that wasn't a question you expected, and it takes you way off of the bullet points that you want to talk about, and make sure you get in if you want to monetize or optimize your presentation so you bring clients and customers back to you. You always come back to your notes. And it's why it's so important that you do the rehearsal and your preparation, because you want to get across to every listener. This is why it's so important, why you as the interviewee are doing what you're doing, whether it's an event, a service, a product, a workshop, why you wrote the book in the first place. What are the key points? Remember, the listener is always your end game. Sure, you want to make that anchor or that interview look good, but you have to know you've got an agenda and you want to come back to it, and you want to give a listener everything they want, because in the end, that's going to make the host look best as well. How do you interview so you make your host look good? Because that is a key point. Whether you get booked because you're talking to a producer or an assistant who books you, their end job is to make the interview host, the anchor, look good. So you want to make them look good, make the host look good, everybody looks good, and they love you. And that has to happen, or it only will happen if you're easy to work with and everybody loves you. So smile a lot. Make sure you pause. Give concrete, concise answers. Know what they're going to be in advance, because if you know the questions, you gave them the questions. Prepare for specific, concrete answers. So give them all the details in advance. Are you going to do exercise demos? You want to kind of ask, is the host going to be in heels and a dress? So you don't want to be doing feet up on a ball doing a bridge if that's the case, right? So bring models if necessary. Ask if you should. Give your host all the questions in advance. You can list questions on your pitch or list the answers on the pitch, because then they'll know what to ask. And often you'll be asked to provide 3 to 5 questions you'd like to be asked, and the interviewer may change those slightly so it makes sense for their audience, because they know their audience better than you do. But specifically, those questions should set you up to respond with your key talking points. So do this carefully. It's not too hard once you get into the habit of doing it. Just because you get the interview doesn't mean you're good. So just being there and on is not enough. You could bomb, and that's not good. I've interviewed hundreds of people in the last 6 years for 2 podcasts. Some have been amazing, and some have not. In fact, they've been really uncomfortable interviews. The guests didn't have key points, didn't have a strong opinion, didn't have any energy, and they rambled with answers. maybe just lacking a little confidence or experience, potentially lacking rehearsal time. So if you play your rehearsal back to yourself and you wouldn't go after you for an interviewee, nobody else will either. Don't let that be you. You won't be asked back. And unless it's a live segment, you may not even get published, even after you've recorded it. No one is going to release what they feel is a weak interview on what is their real estate. If that's a presentation, a panelist summit, if it's a podcast. A big part of doing a killer interview, even if it's 2 minutes long, is knowing what you want to happen afterwards. And that involves 2 parts. So this is the big piece of being interviewed and what you want to focus on. First, what you do with the opportunity matters. Make sure you use the video clip from the news. So it's somewhere, if they've dedicated a segment to you sharing your fitness or health or wellness information, there's a segment and it's on their site. Share that, get the clip and download it, and then share that segment out and use them, tag them in it for additional publicity, give them a thank you, talk about your talking point, and take a selfie of yourself, say, with the anchor or your show host, or in front of the room with the audience behind you to share on social media and on your email, because that increases your credibility. But above all, have a call to action while you're in the interview, because you will always be asked where someone listening can learn more about you. Second, knowing what action you want the viewer or the listener, the reader to take is key if you want to get clients or customers out of these opportunities. And you do, even if you don't yet know what you're going to sell them. Maybe you're not ready yet, but you know you're working on this. If you want to start a conversation with them, you've got to get them over to something that you own. Ideally, that's your email list. You've got to grow that so that when you do have a product or a service, you've got an audience just waiting for it, ripe for it. You need to have a very clear next step for them to take when they go to your website. Are you giving away a free ebook, as we call it, a PDF, or a cheat sheet with the exercises you've just demonstrated? Is there an invitation to your free event that they have to sign up for to RSVP and save a seat? Are you really ready? Do an audit of your website before you ever have an appearance. If you're in front of a group of older women, for instance, and maybe that's not your market, but put your market in there. Does your website look like something that will attract them? So if it is a group of older women you're talking to, does your website look like some kind of advertising for Monster energy drinks? If it's black with neon and white font on dark background, which makes it really hard to read for an older adult, even more so, or it has images of 6 packs of abs, that is not going to build your business with that target market. Decide who you serve and dedicate time and energy to make sure that your images and your website clearly relays that. Know that somebody who gets to your website is interested enough to spend maybe a little more than the 7 seconds. That's the typical attention span, but not much. Tell her exactly what to do when she gets there. Is there an immediate ask for her email address in exchange for a juicy freebie that she can't say no to? It's irresistible. Be ready to capture emails and to deliver that gift. So immediately, within minutes, ideally, when someone puts their email in and they want something, know that they expect it within 5 or 10 minutes. Tell them if it's going to be up to 15 minutes, go look at your spam or your trash if you don't see it, but make sure you have this set up, because if you're really here and you're listening, in 2019, whether you have a brick and mortar building or you have digital courses or programs, services that you offer, this is a must. You cannot bury your head in the sand anymore if you really want to grow your business, scale it, in a way that you can make money and not just be exchanging $1 for an hour. Don't send anybody to a page on a website with 5 choices and 20 pages of rabbit holes that they can fall down. Send them to a very specific page where there's one action to take. That's called a landing page, to do the one relevant thing that is a logical next step for them from the interview that you've just done. And P.S., if you don't have or you don't know yet what a landing page is or looks like, get to your marketing team, get them up to speed on why this is crucial, get a new marketing coach who can help you, but do this. Building a landing page takes less than 5 minutes. If you do it right and you're in charge of your own website, if you have a WordPress website, you can go back in and do this. And it's not time consuming, it's not expensive, but it will cost you if you don't have one or more, especially if you are in a large organization where you serve multiple types of customers. Maybe you serve the older adult female, but you also serve the high school athlete and everything in between. You need more than one landing page on your website. That massive homepage where they'll find what they need. No, they won't, and they don't want to take the time to do it. All of these step-by-steps are pieces that you need to know and part of learning how to interview so you can get clients and customers, or maybe interns and employees from your public appearances. All of them, every one of them. I talk about these steps of, what's next, how to build a freebie, how to create blogs and articles that will attract people, take them to a next step, what a landing page is, in the podcast and the blogs here at fitnessmarketingmastery.com. But if you want help with specific steps, you need to take and the accountability to get them done. You've got 2 options. Number 1, request a consultation about private business coaching. Because here's the deal. My private coaching is not outrageously expensive, but it will cost you if you don't have these steps in place. If you're selling anything at all, this will sell, or you'll reap your reward back if you sell even just one package. Because none of us wants to spin our wheels knowing I need to be doing this and that, but you're busy putting out fires, servicing the customers and clients you've got. You've painted yourself into a wall, so you can't get out. I get it. Number 2 is if you serve women in midlife, just like I do, and becoming a flipping 50 specialist is also a good fit for you, then you can get that, the flipping 50 specialist certification, and you can get 4 months of mastermind group for less than the cost of private coaching. And you'll save over $500 on the combination. So I'll leave the links to that in the show notes. And then don't miss the next episode. So do your homework here. And in the next episode, I teased it earlier, I'm going to talk about how to get booked for interviews. I did this how to interview episode first because you've got to be ready. You actually don't want to get stuck in an interview and give a weak interview. You've got a message and you want to deliver it strong. So I just want to help pull it out of you. You also don't want to wait until it's perfect, by the way, or you'd never do anything. But once you really do the homework and you know how to interview, you want to start getting those opportunities for free advertising. So tune in next week for how to do that. Who do I reach out to? What are some ideas to get started? Fitness pros, if you have a question, leave it below the show link at fitnessmarketingmastery.com/how-to-interval. Wow, of course, right? That's what we would say. How to interview. And there's a dash or a hyphen, better said, between each one of those. And I would appreciate it so much if you'd leave a rating in iTunes. Check out the blog and other podcast episodes at fitnessmarketing.com where I support some of the steps I've talked about here. And don't miss the next episode. Once you've done the homework and you're ready, and you should be on TV, on the radio, and presenting at events. Next week, next episode is all about free advertising opportunities.